Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to try to dive deep into two really interesting sources and see if we can connect them in some way and maybe gain some new insights. We're going to be looking at The Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukov
Oh, fantastic.
and also The Law of One.
Oh, very cool.
Are you familiar with The Seat of the Soul?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Yeah, so, and The Law of One material.
very familiar with that, yes.
Okay, great. So for our listeners who maybe are familiar with one or the other or both, our goal today is to see if we can kind of connect these two sources of information and see if there's any interesting insights that come out.
Sounds great, I love it.
Yeah. So the seat of the soul, it's really all about. How would you characterize the seat of the soul?
Yeah, so the seat of the soul, I think, is really about that personal evolution. It's a guide to really guide us into finding our authentic power and that power that comes from aligning with our soul's purpose.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and then you have the Law of One, which is this vast exploration of consciousness and reality and spiritual evolution, all kind of framed within this idea of a universal law.
Yeah, and they approach those topics in very different ways.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like the seat of the soul is very much like a personal journey, and the law of one is very much like a cosmic journey. But it's interesting that there's that connection there between the personal and the cosmic.
Absolutely. Like they're approaching very similar ideas, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things that I really loved about the seat of the soul was this idea that humanity is moving from external power to authentic power.
Yeah.
And it made me think about, I think it was in the Law of One material where they talk about the densities. And it seemed like that there was a connection there between the idea of these densities and the evolution of consciousness and moving from this external power to authentic power.
Totally. And I think the Law of One really provides a framework for understanding that transition. When we talk about densities, think of it as stages of evolution.
Okay.
For consciousness, and each density presents unique challenges and lessons, and it's pushing us towards greater understanding, ultimately towards that authentic power that Zukov talks about.
So it's not just individuals evolving, but it's the entire human race.
That's right. It's a collective evolution.
Yeah, and moving through these stages, where do you think humanity is right now on that density ladder?
That's a great question, and I think it's a question that has been debated by many who study the Law of One.
Okay,
Some believe that we are on the cusp of transitioning to fourth density,
okay.
which is characterized by love and understanding. But we still see, a lot of the hallmarks of third density playing out. The power struggle, separation, self-interest.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very much third density stuff.
Yeah, and that's something that both texts talk about is that kind of struggle between service to self and service to others.
Oh, absolutely.
Zukov really focuses on the destructive nature of seeking power over others,
Yeah.
and he really emphasizes compassion and reverence.
And what's fascinating is that the Law of One places that choice at the center of its cosmology.
Hmm.
This whole idea that service to self or service to others is not just a personal preference, but it's a driving force behind our spiritual evolution. It shapes the reality we experience.
Wow. It's almost like choosing, a different path on a video game.
Yeah, exactly.
And they both have a different sets of challenges and rewards. And one of the things that the Law of One talks about that I thought was really interesting is this idea of a veil that kind of obscures our memories of past lives
Yes.
and our true nature when we enter into this third density reality.
Right.
And that ties in with what Zukov says about the limitations of the five-sensory human.
Absolutely.
We're so focused on the physical world that we often miss those subtle signals. From our soul, those whispers is intuition and guidance that could connect us to our true nature. So is this veil like a handicap? Like, why would we do that to ourselves?
It's a good question. It feels kind of disheartening, right, to think that we willingly agreed to enter this reality
Yeah.
with limited awareness. But the Law of One suggests that the veil was actually a deliberate choice, not a punishment,
Okay.
but it was implemented to intensify the learning experience in third density,
Okay.
to allow for the full exercise of free will. Imagine if we constantly remember the consequences of our actions
Yeah.
from past lives. Would we truly have free will?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
It's like we chose to play the game on hard mode,
exactly.
knowing that it would offer greater growth opportunities.
Yeah,
And speaking of growth, one thing that both sources emphasize is the power we have to create our own experiences.
oh, for sure. That's a central theme in both.
Yeah, and I love the way that Zukov puts it. He says, you create your reality.
Right.
It's so powerful.
Chills.
Yeah, chills.
Yeah.
Because it shifts the focus from being a victim of circumstance to being an active participant in shaping our lives. And the law of one adds another layer to this with the concept of catalyst.
Yes,
And I was
yes.
hoping you could explain catalyst a little bit because I think that's something that people may not be as familiar with.
Sure. So the law of one states that every single event, every interaction is a catalyst for learning and growth, whether we perceive it as positive or negative.
Okay.
It's all about how we use those experiences to learn and evolve.
So it's not just about reacting to those catalysts, but also about understanding
Exactly.
the concept of karma,
That's right.
which is often misunderstood.
Absolutely. People think of it as punishment, but it's really not.
Yeah.
Karma is really a neutral balancing force. It's about learning from the consequences of our choices and taking responsibility for our actions.
And I remember in the Law of One, there was a specific example in session 50
Yes.
where they talked about a soul choosing to set up a difficult catalyst before incarnating.
Right.
Almost like intentionally choosing a challenging life path for
Exactly.
greater soul growth.
Yeah.
So we're not just passive recipients of fate, we're actively shaping our destinies.
Absolutely. We have much more of an active role than we realize.
Wow. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. It really challenges that notion that things just happen to us, right?
Yeah.
Like we have a much more active role in
Yeah.
our soul's evolution than we often realize.
And that evolution, I'm wondering, like, as we evolve, both of these sources suggests that our perception expands beyond just the limitations of our five senses.
Right.
Zukov talks about this concept of the multisensory human,
Yes.
someone who can perceive beyond the physical realm
Right.
and can access the wisdom of their soul.
Yeah, and that resonates with the Law of One's description of how those higher energy centers, like the blue and indigo rays,
Yeah.
become activated as we move through the densities. So it's like our senses are evolving,
Right.
allowing us to tune into
Okay.
those subtler frequencies of reality.
So I'm curious about how that ties in with Zukov's idea of spiritual partnership.
Yeah.
He contrasts it with the traditional marriage model, and he suggests that it's really about two souls coming together to support each other's growth and recognizing their inherent equality.
That's a beautiful concept.
Yeah.
And you can see a parallel in the Law of One, particularly when they discuss the activation of the Green Ray Energy Center.
Okay.
There's this emphasis on these intense energy exchanges between souls that choose to connect on a deeper level,
Okay.
almost like a conscious dance of shared evolution.
Yeah, so it's fascinating to me how these ideas from these two seemingly disparate sources are converging around this idea of conscious evolution,
Right.
both individually and collectively.
It is pretty fascinating how all these things come together.
Yeah, and within that evolution, I think that both the seed of the soul and the law of one really acknowledge that this journey isn't always easy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They embrace the challenges as part of the process.
Yeah.
Zukov talks about facing on fears and addictions and suggesting that they're not roadblocks, but signposts
Yes.
that point us toward areas that need healing.
Right.
Like those negative patterns are actually trying to help us evolve.
Absolutely.
And the law of one doesn't sugarcoat the difficulties either.
No.
Even Carla Rugert, the channel for these teachings,
Yes.
openly shared the physical and emotional challenges
Hmm.
she experienced while channeling.
Yeah, and there's a particularly poignant passage in Book 5 of the Law of One
Okay.
where she describes these intense energy fluctuations and physical discomfort she endured.
So it makes their message even more powerful, knowing that it came through.
Oh, for sure.
Such personal trials and tribulations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it adds a layer of authenticity
Yeah, for sure.
to the whole thing. And if we layer on this concept of Orion Crusaders,
Okay.
those negative entities mentioned in both sources who seek to disrupt those dedicated to service to others,
Mm-hmm.
it paints a picture of spiritual evolution as this kind of cosmic battleground.
Okay.
It's a test of our commitment to love and light.
That's quite a dramatic image.
It is.
But it does raise the question, though.
Yeah.
If the journey is so challenging,
Mm-hmm.
and there are these negative forces at play,
Mm-hmm.
how can we possibly navigate it all? Are we just left to fend for ourselves?
Right. That's where this idea of guides and teachers comes in. Both the seat of the soul and the law of one offer reassurance
Okay.
that we're not alone in this process.
And Zukov describes them so eloquently.
Yes, he does.
These guides and teachers who lovingly assist us at every stage,
Right.
offering wisdom and encouragement when we need it most.
Yeah. And the law of one offers this concept of the higher self.
Right.
That future version of ourselves,
Yeah.
offering guidance and support from a place of greater understanding.
It's like having a cosmic cheerleader on the sidelines.
Exactly.
Plus, the law of one talks about wonders.
Yes.
Those souls from other densities who incarnated on Earth, specifically to help raise consciousness.
Yeah. What a beautiful reminder that we're part of something
Yeah.
much larger than ourselves.
So, amidst all these challenges and support systems,
Mm-hmm.
The law of one really emphasizes that the ultimate choice is always ours.
It is.
Service to others or service to self.
Always comes back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like this central theme
Yeah.
running through everything we've been discussing.
The golden thread.
Yeah, this constant reminder that every thought,
Mm-hmm.
every action contributes to our karmic path
Mm-hmm.
and influences the reality we experience.
Exactly.
And if the seed of the soul is correct in suggesting that we're moving towards this era of authentic power,
Right.
understanding this choice becomes even more crucial.
I agree. So if we're moving toward this era of authentic power and this choice between service to others or service to self is so central,
Mhm.
what does that tell us about the nature of authentic power itself? It makes you think about what that shift will look like, right? Like both individually and on a global scale. If authentic power is the driving force of this new era, how does that manifest? What are the hallmarks of someone operating from that space?
Yeah, what does that look like?
Right, yeah.
What does that world look like?
Yeah, and the seed of the soul suggests that authentic power is rooted in qualities like compassion,
Yes,
humility, forgiveness, and courage.
right.
It's about recognizing our inherent connection to all beings and acting from a place of love and understanding.
And that resonates so much with the law of one's emphasis on seeking the heart of self.
Yeah,
It's about connecting with that inner compass that guides us toward our highest path, toward service to others.
and the beautiful thing is that both of these sources offer practical guidance on how to cultivate those qualities
Yes.
and access that inner wisdom.
Yeah.
Zukov talks about the power of intuition.
Yes. Those gut feelings and hunches that can guide us if we learn to listen.
Right, and the Law of One delves into practices like meditation and contemplation,
Right.
suggesting that we can directly communicate with our higher selves and receive guidance from the realms beyond our physical senses.
But it's not just about sitting in silence,
No,
waiting for messages to drop into our lap.
exactly.
Both sources emphasize the importance of aligning our thoughts and actions
Yes.
with these principles of love and unity.
Living those principles in our daily lives.
Yeah.
Making choices that reflect our commitment to service to others.
So creating a resonance between our inner world
Yes.
and our outer world, aligning our intentions with our actions.
That's it.
And speaking of intention,
Yes.
that's another powerful concept that comes up in both texts.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember that affirmation from the seat of the soul?
Yeah.
You create your experiences.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we're not just passive observers.
Mm-hmm.
We're active participants in shaping our reality through our thoughts, beliefs, and choices.
And when you combine that with the Law of One's concept of catalyst,
Yeah,
it becomes incredibly empowering.
yeah.
It suggests that we can actually use our intention to set up experiences that will support our growth and evolution.
It's almost like becoming the architects
Yes.
of our own spiritual curriculum.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
consciously choosing the lessons we need to learn and the challenges that we need to overcome.
Exactly. And with that power comes responsibility, though, right?
Yes.
Both sources caution against using intention to manipulate or control others.
Yeah.
It's about aligning with the highest good, love, and compassion as our guiding principles.
Yeah. Authentic power is never about dominance or force.
Right.
It's about harmonizing with the universal flow of love,
Yes.
working in service to the greater whole.
That's beautiful.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the seat of the soul and the law of one, it feels like we've uncovered some profound connections here.
We have.
They both offer a roadmap for navigating this transition into an era of authentic power.
Right.
This era characterized by love, understanding, and unity.
And maybe the most important takeaway is that we're not just waiting for this new era to arrive.
Right.
We're actively co-creating it.
Yes.
With every choice we make, every intention we set, and every action we take.
The journey towards a more loving and harmonious world begins within each of us.
I love that.
So as we conclude, I leave you with a question to ponder. How can you embody authentic power in your life, in your relationships, and in the world around you?
Beautiful, because as Gary Zukov reminds us, we are not powerless. We are powerful beyond measure.
That's it for our deep dive into the seat of the soul and the law of one. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep shining your light.